and gentlemen, on behalf of New England Antique Racers, my name is Pete Lucian, president of the club. I'd like to welcome you all here today for the 2006 New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Before we start today's program, I'd like to take a moment to remember two men who have passed away these last 2 months. Mr. Marvin Chase, longtime driver, good friend, who served as NEAR's vice president. Mr. Buddy Krebs, Hall of Famer, and who 25 years ago served as New England Antique Racers' very first president. If you would join with me in a moment of silence. Welcome once again and congratulations to the new class of 2006. We hope this day will be very memorable. Congratulations. I just have a couple of quick announcements, but before I do that, it's become a tradition every year, the past 8 years. Could we have all the previous classes of the New England Antique Auto Racers Hall of Fame please stand at this time to be recognized? Ladies and gentlemen, the Hall of Famers of New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. A couple of quick announcements. There are identities from New England Antique Racers on sale in the front lobby. Commemorative shirts are available for this class of 2006. We also have our good friends from Pro 9 and Coastal 181. And I'd ask all of you, if you haven't done so already, to sign up and be a member of the family of NEAR. I know $20 does not go far in a tank of gas to come down to an event like this, but $20 can ensure that this event goes on for another 9 years and beyond. I can't name every person involved in making an event like this happen for fear of leaving somebody out, but I would like to thank the committees, the Hall of Fame Executive Committee, the Selection Committee, the people that helped with the photos, the presenters, and everybody involved. I truly thank you, and I know everyone here in this audience thanks you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for everybody involved. To lead off the festivities today, I have an award. It's a dedication award. It's going to be given out to a man who, for 8 years, served as NEAR's president, and who was also the backbone behind what you see here today. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call to the stage Mr. Al Feeney. Good to see you, Al.
Thank you, Peter.
Al, for your outstanding service as New England Antique Racers president for 8 years, as well as your hard work and dedication to the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame, I present you with this plaque of dedication, as well as the club took a vote this year, and you are also the recipient of the Frank Marauder Award for your dedication.
Thank you so much. Forgot about it. This Frank Marauder Award, it means a lot to a lot of people. Been given consistently for the last 25 years. Some great people have won this before me, and I'm proud to keep up the tradition. You can see the full roster of the beneficiaries in the traveling museum that we have. Just think about something that it hit me hard last Saturday, January 21st. That was the 25th anniversary, 25 years ago last Saturday. Buddy Krebs, Charlie Stebbins, etc. got together for the very first NEAR meeting. It's great to be able to keep this going for 25 years, and I thank everybody who was involved with me receiving this award.
Now, to come to the stage and present the Special Veterans Award is noted New England racing historian and a man of over 50,000 pictures, Mr. R.A. Sylvia.
The Veterans Committee was basically formed about 3 years ago to ensure that gentlemen that were vital to the history of our sport got admission to the Hall of Fame, while knowing that many of them performed long before near was formed or anybody's recent memory. The committee is formed of 4 gentlemen that are, while not the oldest people around, but active historians. We have Mr. Pete Zanotti from Connecticut, Mr. Bruce Cohen from Somerville, Mass., Mr. Ed Duncan from Raleigh, Mass., and myself from Warwick, Rhode Island. And we informally caucus during the year and discuss potential candidates and work it out amongst ourselves and pass it by the club. And this year we're inducting 3 people into this category. They are Bill Randall, Red Cummings, and Johnny Kay. And we're fortunate having Johnny with us today to be honored. Now, Bill Randall grew up on Boston's North Shore, and before the war, he helped out some gentlemen in his neighborhood on a sprint car. And they went to Keene, New Hampshire, and Bill managed to take a test ride, and he was going faster than the regular driver, so Bill continued driving from that point on. A year or 2 later, when the midgets became well known in the East, he got into those also, and he won his first midget race after the war in 1946 at Thompson, Connecticut. He was born William Charles Randall, but he was better known as the Thin Man due to his tall and rather lean physique. He pretty much dominated Bay State for a period, went with United Car Owners in '48 when the big split occurred, ran a lot of ARD shows, AAA shows, pretty much stayed with ARDC for the latter part of his career, did a little dabbling in sprint cars to the point where in 1957 he was the USAC Eastern Sprint Car Champion in Ed Stone's car that was wrenched by Buster Warkey. Unfortunately, in 1963, Bill suffered fatal injuries at Lime Rock, Connecticut on the road course in the Ken Bren car. And we lost a gentleman that was well known throughout the Northeast. Our second man, Red Cummings, also came from the north side of Boston, Wenham, Mass., and also Salem, Mass. When he got out of the war, he got into the midgets and was a very good midget driver, but when the stock cars blossomed in '48, he switched over to them, and to the point where in '48 and '49, he was New England stock car champion, driving for a car owner named Ed Litwin from Salem. And Ed built some pretty potent machines. At one point, he had as many as 4 modifieds running out there, number 42 and 43 and variations thereof. And they were so successful around the turn of the decade here that their car and Red's picture and all were used in national ad campaigns for Escuderian cans in Speed Age magazine and other places. Red stayed with the stock cars, never went back to the midgets, ran the cut downs at Lonsdale, Norwood, spot appearance here and there at Hudson, Seekonk once or twice, and kind of ended up his career in the cut downs at Norwood and Lonsdale until it closed in 1956. The third member we're glad to have with us here today is Johnny Kay. Johnny came out of New Britain, Connecticut. Being in the kind of in the western part of the state, he ran mostly ARDC, AAA in '52 when they made a little tour through the east here, Norwood, Seekonk, Lonsdale. Did a lot of traveling and eventually traveled pretty much throughout the eastern 2/3 of the country. And I know I was always an avid reader, and I had a subscription to Illustrated Speedway News, and every week I'd go through everything in there, and so Johnny Kay's in Cincinnati, Johnny Kay's in Indianapolis, Johnny Kay's in Oklahoma. And it kind of made me feel good. I guess I've always been a homer, but see a local guy, so to speak, carrying our name throughout the country. John did so well that he won one of the classics on the night before the 500 at the West 16th Street Speedway in Indianapolis, across the street from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where they had 3 separate shows, the day and night before the 500. And it was a gathering place for midget cars and drivers from all over the country, hoping to catch somebody's eye, showcase your talents in front of the best in the country. And John did that. And we were proud of him then, and we're still proud of him now. John had a very bad accident in Texas that many people didn't think he would survive. But being the tough gentleman of Polish descent that he is, he not only survived, but he drove again back east here, both in NEMA and the ARDC, and kind of wound down his career in the 80s, but stays in touch with the vintage activities. And I think anyone from New England is proud, if they had seen or they're aware of the accomplishments of these three gentlemen, that we're proud to induct into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame under the Veterans Committee. Thank you.
And now it's time to bring to the stage, and please welcome, a man who will be giving out the Jack Marotta Media Memorial Award. And when you sign up with NEAR and you pay your $20, you are a part of a one big family. Please welcome to the stage the Vice President of the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame, Mr. Bruce B. Cohen.
Thank you, Pete. It's a great honor to be here. Looking around this banquet hall, it's just an incredible turnout of racing talent and racing people. Jack Ratta was a pioneer in motorsports reporting out of New Hampshire. He was famous for going to Indianapolis for something like 45 consecutive years. And this award is given in his memory. Jack passed away a few years ago. And the first recipient of the award for this year would be from Sharon, Massachusetts, Mr. Lou Modestino. Lou has been writing since the early 60s in various venues, for the early Stock Car magazine, Circle Track and Highway, and various other publications. He's been with the Brockton Enterprise for many, many years. He's been a pioneer. He's always been very hard-nosed, hard-hitting, not afraid to write and say what he thinks, regardless of who gets offended. And I think that's very important. And he has Lou's Motorsports TV calendar, which gives people a complete rundown of what's going on in television in the motorsports field. I'd like to call Lou up here just to say a few words and to show him our appreciation for almost 45 years of dedication and hard work to New England motorsports. Lou?
I'd just like to say thank you very much. And today is a special day, just like when somebody gets married, has their first child, and graduates from college. I'm honored by this award and by those who think enough of me. Thanks again to all of you and to the New England Antique Racers that made this all possible. Thank you.
The second recipient of this award is someone that I'm very proud to call a friend. He's followed motorsports for many, many years, writing in the Norwalk Hour, following the New Englanders, the LaJoy family, among others, around the racing circuit. He also wrote and covered many other sports for the Norwalk Hour. A true friend to racing, someone who is held in the highest esteem by racing people and especially among his peers. I'd like to call up the one and only Mr. Charlie Mitchell.
Thank you, Bruce. I deserve all that compliments. It's a pleasure to be here, and the one thing, you work for a newspaper, you cover a lot of sports, but auto racing is the one that I really took a liking to. And the people, that's the difference between that and other sports, because you people are so down to earth, and so honest, and so talkative. As far as, I want to extend my congratulations to all the honorees today, well deserved for all of you. And as Lou mentioned, I was fortunate enough to, Don LaJoy, Jimmy Smith, both natives, 5-point championship teams with Danbury. And a lot of people may not know, NASCAR had a midget sanction in the early 50s. And the 1953 and 54 champ was a guy by the name of Freddie Meeker from Norwalk, who I never met. And it's just been a wonderful time. The Sharp family, today Scott Sharp's racing in Daytona, Randy's racing in Daytona, LaJoy, and Teddy, which they're all doing well, last I knew. But anyway, thank you all very much. I want to thank my family, my friends for coming here, and part of the LaJoy family's over there, because Don is down watching his son race. And Butch Wood, who raced for years in Middletown, New York, is here. so many others. Nappy, who raced in Middletown, New York. Anyway, thank you all, and enjoy your day.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now start the second half of our ceremony. But before we do, I'd like to ask Mr. Lou Boyd from Coastal 181 to come up to the stage to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. I just would like, on a very quick personal note, to add my own just positive feelings towards everything that Al Feeney has done. Al, this has been just an incredible thing that you've started. And I would also like to take note that somebody else who's been instrumental in the air has been feeling a little bit poorly recently and is going to have to back away from things. And he, too, has done a splendid job, and that's Danny Party. A year ago at this time, you might recall that we were having some actually wonderful conversation about something really cool that had happened to Near, and that was when Dick Watson departed. He had very generously provided nicely for this club in his will. And you'll recall that we talked about that last year, and we also talked about it in the context of how difficult it is in difficult times, such as these, to keep an organization like this going. Well, I've got another happy little story to tell you this year, and something that's going to happen, has happened, that's going to keep us going along for a few more years. Bruce Cohen and his wife Linda, will you just wave so everybody can see where you are? I'm sure a lot of people out there know Bruce Cohen, and those of you who know him know that he's quite a piece of work. Bruce has a way of saying what's on his mind and saying it rather directly and rather loudly. I can think of 100 instances in which that's happened, and one of them I think you'll get a kick out of. This was the night before the original Spring Sizzler, and that was a race that Dick Berggren, Bruce Cohen, and I promoted because we needed some money for our race cars. Well, it was the night before the Sizzler, and we had planned a huge purse for the next day. And you need to understand the context of all of this. We were broker than cracked glass at the time. And we'd gotten enough money to pay the purse for the next day, and we went down to Stafford, and Bruce slept in the office with that bag of money next to him. And he also had a gun. We were pretty petrified about this whole thing. Well, in the middle of the night, Bruce woke up, and there was a stirring in the office. Up he gets, out comes the gun, and he yells, "I don't care who you are, you come in here any further and you're going out ventilated." You know who it was? It was Jackie. Fortunately, he had the good sense to hide under the beer stand and everything worked out okay. But this stuff just kept going on, and one time I was the brunt of it myself, unfortunately more than once. It was at Hudson, I think, one Sunday night, and we'd won a feature. And as features go, some of them can be easy, and some of them are really tough. And this was a tough one. And I'll be honest with you that I felt fairly good about myself going into the pits. But I got into the pits, and there was Bruce waving his arms around, and he was so agitated that his hair was just stuck out straight. And I took my helmet out, and I realized he was yelling about me. And he was saying, "That goddamn Boyd, look at that car. There's not a bent rim on it. What a stroker he is." Well, so he'll talk about anything, but the one thing he won't talk about is what he does himself. And Bruce and Linda Cohen had a great year in 2005. And I want all of you to know, because I am his friend, that he has shared it with Near. And they've made a very, very generous contribution to this club, for which we all need to thank him very much. So with a round of applause, why don't we let Bruce, Linda Cohen, join Dick and Linda Watson in the good guy.
I would like to announce and introduce the MC for today's event, the voice of Thompson, Waterford, Stafford, journalist, and he's going to stick on to this ceremony like a Band-Aid on a mummy. I got that from him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matt Buckler.
And of course, Pete said I have to keep this moving faster than a race driver moving to a open bar, so I'll try to follow that in order to be invited back in the future. Lou Boyd, thanks for reminding me never to go on a camping trip with Bruce Cohen unless you have a flak jacket with you on hand, and I'll remember that in the future. But tonight, very simple festivity. It's about a group of legends and how they got that way. You know, we have people we're honoring today from Maine to Connecticut, but they all have one common bond. They had a passion and they overachieved. And tonight we're going to hear some very fascinating stories. Some of them might even be true. This is a microphone and not a polygraph, so we can't vouch for their accuracy. But we are going to have some entertainment today, and you're going to enjoy these next couple hours because this is a highlight. You know, there was a song once, I was country before country was cool. These guys were auto racing before the TV networks discovered it, Madison Avenue discovered it. These guys, and they're still auto racing today. So this is going to be just a spectacular afternoon. And to turn the ignition key and get us started today, a guy who knows what being a Hall of Famer is all about because he's written books on two of them. Bug Stevens and Richie Evans, one of the great journalists in auto racing today, and he just hails right down the road here from Southington, Connecticut, Bones Boussier.
In racing, just like in life, success has a way of coming to those who want it the most, those who chase it the hardest, those who go for it. Jim McGee goes for it. He is the most successful chief mechanic and team manager in the history of IndyCar racing, and he is, no question, the most decorated mechanic ever to emerge from New England. 4 times he was the winning chief mechanic in the Indianapolis 500. His cars have won 9 national championships under USAC, CART, and Champ Car sanctions. All that glory didn't just fall into McGee's lap. He went for it. But McGee's biggest go-for-it decision happened a long way from a racetrack. And to get to that story, I need to tell you this story. McGee was raised in Boston in the Mattapan section. In the service bay of a local Ford dealership worked a mechanic named Paul Duty. This was in the mid-50s when racing in Massachusetts was a crazy blend of full-sized coupes and chopped-up, mean-looking cars called cut-downs. Duty owned a race car, and to McGee that made him a very important person. Before long, Jim was tagging along to the Saturday night brawls at the Norwood Arena, helping Paul and his colorful driver, Garvin Cooper. His nights at Norwood put McGee in touch with a mechanical wizard named Dick Carman. Carman, from Foxborough, had designed a particularly fast cut-down driven by Eddie Hoyle. In McGee's words, quote, Dick Carman was a genius. He understood things from an engineering point of view, unquote. Carman was something else, too. He was an Indy 500 buff, and his home was packed with literature about Indianapolis and the roadsters which had just come into vogue. By 1957, Carman and young Jimmy McGee were hitting the road to watch the Indy cars anywhere within reasonable driving distance. Trenton, of course. Langhorne, why not? In those days, before carbon fiber and wind tunnels, anyone who could build a well-thought-out cut-down could build an Indy car too, if he was so inclined. Carman and McGee were so inclined. So right there in Carman's basement, they built themselves an Indy Roadster. It was, Jim says, a beautiful car. They designed it, welded it, even sponsored it. Carman with the salary from his engineering job, and McGee, barely out of high school, with money he earned working insane hours on 2 jobs, the days as a flat-rate Ford mechanic, nights in the mailroom at the local newspaper. They hauled that homemade car to Trenton in April of '59, Carman, Hoyle, and McGee. They carried, in McGee's words, 1 set of tires and enough money to get us through the tolls. They were in a little bit over their heads, surrounded by the best cars of the day. The Dean Van Line Special, the Agajanian Special, the Bose Sealfast Special, and the best mechanics of the day, George Bignotti, A.J. Watson, Clint Bronner. But they had one thing going for them, the workmanship in that beautiful roadster. McGee recalls Clint Bronner, the gruff old wrench, inspecting their pride and joy and proclaiming, "You guys really built that thing?" Now, Bronner may well have been the top mechanic in all of American racing in 1959, but he was also a terrific judge of talent. Just 1 year earlier, Bronner had arranged the first ever Indy 500 ride for an obscure midget driver from Houston, Texas, named A.J. Foyt. And this same Clint Bronner now saw enough in Jim McGee at Trenton to mention that he might have an open position on the Dean Van Lines team for the month of May at Indianapolis. Was McGee interested? You bet he was. Come May, on the strength of his vague job offer, he drove west bound for the Brickyard. But somewhere between Trenton in April and Indianapolis in May in that spring of 1959, some signals had gotten crossed. Bronner had hired a few extra crewmen. McGee wasn't needed. He hung around Indianapolis for the next week anyway, happy to just be at the grand old Speedway. Finally, down to his last $15, he faced reality. It was time to go home. He climbed into his 1953 Ford and headed east on Old Route 40, known back then as the National Road. It was 60 or 70 miles later that Jim McGee had the go-for-it moment that changed his life. I got to the Ohio border, he recalls, and I said to myself, why, you chicken shit. Damn it, you can get a job washing cars or doing something, anything, for a couple of weeks. I turned that car around and drove it back to Indianapolis. I went to the track the next morning and I found out that Clint had gotten mad at one of his guys and sent him home. Now, McGee stood outside the Dean Van Lines garage in Gasoline Alley, and he heard the great Clint Bronner say, come on in here, we'll put you to work. And what work Jim McGee has done since that day. His 4 Indianapolis 500 wins came in 1969 with driver Mario Andretti, in 1979 with Rick Mears, 1982 with Gordon Johncock, and in 1989 with Emerson Fittipaldi. And when McGee wasn't winning at Indy, he wasn't far off. His cars have finished second in the Indy 500 7 times. It's a cliche these days to say that a man has been there and done that. With McGee, it's no lie. His 90 victories are spread among such historic ovals as Trenton, Phoenix, Langhorne, and Milwaukee, road courses from Watkins Glen in New York to Riverside in California, even the old fairgrounds dirt miles at Springfield and Du Quoin in the Illinois corn country. He has even watched his cars win in Great Britain, in Australia, and in Japan. His national championships came in 65, 66, and 69 with Andretti, 77 and 78 with Tom Sneva, 79 with Rick Mears, 79 with Emerson Fittipaldi, 89 with Fittipaldi, 1992 with Bobby Rahal, and 1993 with Nigel Mansell. On the team owner side, McGee has worked for giants like Roger Penske, Andy Granatelli, Pat Patrick, Paul Newman and Carl Haas, Bobby Rahal, Parnelli Jones, and his current squad, PKV Racing, among many others. The 2006 Champ Car season marks McGee's 48th year in Major League Racing, and he is the only chief mechanic and/or team manager to have won in each of the last 5 decades. His first big win came in 1965 with Mario Andretti. His most recent came just last June with Cristiano D'Amato. Things have changed in all that time, of course. McGee once told me that in his earliest days, quote, the chief mechanic ran the show. He decided what setup the car ran, even what parts were bought. He even towed the cars. These days, of course, McGee's team can afford a truck driver, and much of the setup work belongs to engineers, but that doesn't faze old Jim. He's right there checking out the computer data the same way he checked out the wear and tear on a pair of treaded Firestones in the Roadster days. Even at my age, he told me, I learn something every day. I don't ever want to feel like I'm the smartest guy on the team. Well, Jim McGee, the truth is that you were the smartest guy on a lot of teams and on a lot of days. But your smartest move and our luckiest move was the decision you made on that May afternoon in 1959, sitting on the side of Old Route 40 in that black 1953 Ford. In choosing to make that U-turn and return to Indianapolis, in choosing to go for it, you gave yourself a career, and you gave the rest of us a shining example of the way dreams can take a brave, imaginative man all the way to the top, all the way from a Massachusetts basement to victory lane at Indianapolis, and literally around the world, again and again and again. It is my high honor to present for induction into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame, the legendary Jim McGee.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to come here. It's such a wonderful thing that you folks have been able to preserve here as far as the tradition and all of the history of the auto racing and you know, the people involved in it over the years. And I just want to thank the people from the New England Antique Auto Group for selecting me in this very prestigious group of gentlemen that have preceded me. But I just kind of, looking back, I just feel so fortunate because when I was young, the people that I was associated with were such great role models. They were hardworking, honest, very dedicated, and their passion for racing was incredible. And you know, when you're young and impressionable, these things have a really great bearing on you know, how you perform in your life. And you know, it all started back when we used to, I had a brother, and he would take me to the races, and you know, I'd watch guys like Red Cummings and Ralph Moody, and it was just, I was just so involved in how they raced there, and the smell of the hamburgers in the arena, and the you know, the racing itself under the lights. I mean, it was incredible, and it was just something that I really wanted to do. And you know, people like Paul Duty, who was the first fellow that I got to know a little bit. He worked, I lived in Mattapan, and he worked in a Ford dealership, Cody Motors, up on Cummings Highway. And all this stuff kind of comes back to me once I start talking about it. But I used to go up there, and I'd sit on a box while he was flat rating cars, and I mean, I was a pest, really, believe me, because I was always asking him questions. And then when I was old enough to get a license and drive, we'd go out to his house. He lived out there in Stoughton, and you know, he didn't have a garage, just a little teeny house with, I think there were 5 kids, and we'd be down in the basement pounding away on things till, you know, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then come summer, we'd take the car out of the basement and assemble it back out in the backyard and go to the racetracks. And those years at Norwood and Westboro, Seekonk, I mean, they were great years. And you know, the competition there was so keen. You know, the drivers in that era, I think, you know, they were top-notch guys, and they could have made it anywhere, you know, in the nation. And the more I look back, Dick Carmen, you know, he was another one, a mentor for me. Dick was such a clever and smart engineer. He could have made it anywhere in any type of racing. He was talented, smart, but unfortunately, back here in New England in those days, you know, you just were in the wrong place. It was, you know, a California sport almost, and you know, anybody from the East Coast, you know, they were just kind of looked down on. But still, once I got out there and I saw what talent was out there versus what talent was back here, you know, it really opened my eyes that the people here and the fellows that, you know, I raced with at Norwood at that time, I mean, these people had the talent to make it anywhere in the nation. And I just think it's, again, so wonderful that, you know, there's not many places. I've been to a lot of banquets and to a lot of places around the country, and to see the people here and the tradition that you've been able to keep, it's just wonderful. It really is. And you're all to be congratulated on that, because I think it's something that, you know, we lack in a lot of areas, and it's very important that, you know, this history gets passed down from generation to generation. You know, also, you know, one of the big factors that I learned back here at that time was, you know, the way we worked, and you know, nobody had any money. I mean, it was all what you could do with what you had, and it was a big lesson in life for me, because it's still true that, you know, it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. And you know, that's always been a saying that I've used over the years with the people that have worked for me. And again, a lot of my success and, you know, the things that I've been able to do was because of the people here, and I want to thank you.
Now, our next presenter has been in the business for so long, in the newspaper business, he actually used a typewriter instead of a laptop. And he still is going strong today as a PR man at the Waterford Speed Bowl, Pete Zanardi.
Thank you, Matt, and that's true. I did use a typewriter. I can remember a hot lead for any of you people into the newspaper business. You know, Bonesy shows up, Gene, and what's he do? He knocks us off the pole. We were supposed to be on the pole here, and I was about to thank Gene, a guy that's usually last, Zanardi, I'm usually last. Angelillo, they were going to put him first because of A. So I got my chance to be first. Bonesy shows up, knocks me off it. Anyway, that's one of the things I owe Gene, and it's probably good Gene's not on the pole because that's not a position he's very accustomed to. Midget racing around here, as you folks know, it's a handicap deal, so Gene's usually starting somewhere in the back. I think that says a lot about a guy who's won 15 championships and over 115 features in about 25 years. And I'm here to tell you that's pretty good wherever you race midgets. And he's done it with 3 drivers, Drew Finaro, Russ Storr, Joey Payne. Teddy Christopher even won a race for Gene in a night that I'm sure Marilyn remembers. Interestingly enough, it was Johnny Kay, who was also an honoree today, that got Gene into racing. First in an aborted sprint car program, then in the midgets. And it was also Johnny Kay who suggested that I might find Gene worthy of a story a few years ago. Johnny, it's one of the many things I owe you. And the story was based on the name of Gene Angelillo's racing team, Dumo's Desire. It's a tribute to his late father, Dominic, known as Dumo, who wanted so badly to be part of a successful midget team. Dumo passed on before conditions allowed Gene to do that, but I'm here to tell you, Dumo is part of every one of those championships and every one of those features. Gene will tell you that that was Marilyn's idea, and I have no doubt about that. He'll tell you also that Marilyn is the brains of the outfit. I don't have any doubt about that either. This is those times when you're supposed to stand up here and throw all kinds of accolades at people. And so, okay, I'm telling you right here, Gene and Marilyn have proved over and over in their service to auto racing in general and midget racing in particular, their honesty, their dedication, their generosity, and their incredible work ethic. But I'm also here to tell you, my Goomba Gene can get very mad. He can be very, very human when things don't go around. He's not the best guy to be around when the car doesn't do well. But if I had to take one word, if somebody forced me to take one word to size up Gene and Marilyn, it would be loyalty. Loyalty to those around him. Of course, to his family, to his sport, to his club, to his drivers, to his crew, to his sponsors, to his friends. I suggest those numbers, those incredible Hall of Fame numbers, find their foundation in the simple virtue of loyalty. It is my great, great honor to induct or ask to bring Gene Burgin into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. Did I say Gene Burgin? Well, Gene Burgin drove for him too.
Right, Pete. I just want to say thank you very much for everybody that came, and Pete said it all. Johnny, thank you for starting me out. I don't know if I should be mad at you for spending all this money on me, but thank you very much, John. And Marilyn, he was right. You're the brains.
Now we'll shift gears and bring back a guy who, if you're looking for something to do this winter on those cold winter nights, instead of plowing snow or something, or looking at the weather forecast and Doppler radar, You can read the book about the shoe. I think Lou has taken his words and brought them to life. And now we're going to bring him up to the stage to make our next presentation. Lou Boyd.
Thanks, Matt. So here's the deal. It was a beautiful night. It was Saturday, June 26, 1965. Sultry summer evening, great for racing, and the fans were beginning to pour into Pine Speedway. Everything was looking great except for one thing. That is, the lead group, the Cutdowns, went on strike. Well, so what, you say? What's the big deal? There have been 5,965 tracks in the United States, and judging by the people in this room, I think it's fair to say that all of them are populated by some fairly serious nutcases. So what should be so surprising about strikes? Really nothing, and it shouldn't be surprising to consider that most of the time they don't work. Gosh, at Norwood, just a couple of years before, the Cutdowns had gone on strike, and they got thrown out forever, and the NASCAR mods were brought in. But you know something? June 26, 1965 was different. And the reason it was different is that Bob Cloutier, Don McLaren, Ollie Silva, Bentley Warren, and all those racers who choreographed that strike had something up their sleeve. They had a SWAT team. They had the 3 M's. Now, the 3 M's were hardly the long-haired, pot-smoking musketeers that you'd think about in 1965. In fact, we've met one of them already. In the class of 2000, we inducted Charlie Elliott, the great Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine track builder. Charlie was the M for muscle. Next came the M for money. That was provided by a young guy named Ken Smith, who had started working for a bank. And fortunately for all concerned, he decided to park his rather scary Studebaker race car and work with the Super Modified Club to get it going. Well, he sure did get it going. And he got his career going too. And today he's president of the Pentucket Bank in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and just a wonderful civic leader in that part of Massachusetts. The third M was for mouth. And that was very amply provided by a young teenager named Russ Conway. Now this guy was an energy machine with a typewriter. And he really got a hold of this Super Modified Club, become NESMRA, and he really made something of it. He is, after all, the guy who was the first to use the now world-renowned phrase, "tell your friends." It turns out that Russ, too, did very well in his real career on the side, and he's now a nationally known journalist, a best-selling author, and also a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. Well, these little guys, this Silva Cloutier team with Conway, Smith, and Elliott, this little seed started to grow, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew. It went so far, in fact, that it changed the direction of racing really all over the eastern part of the country. And it's to be noted for many attributes, certainly for technological aggressiveness, wide open racing, giving these local racers national name. Certainly, too, for the great sense of community that it had and helpfulness for people who got hurt, for the friends in its community. Absolutely, a habit of drama, whether it was school bus races with topless women as drivers, or whether it was the Star Classic, everything was the best. Tell your friends. But you know something? The thing that NESMRA will be remembered for the most was the duration. These guys didn't go promote a race or two and then go back to television and back to their jobs. They kept going for 25 years. 1,000 shows, 37 racetracks, 6 states, from Florida to Bathurst, New Brunswick, and at that speedway, the third turn borders on the North Pole. Their last race, finally, happened in 1990 at Canaan, New Hampshire. It's quite possible that 2 or 3 guys working part-time have had as great an impact on this sport somewhere in this country, but it's quite possible that no one ever did. And now I'd like to just take a little bypass here and read you something that Pete Newsham just gave me that's to one of these inductees. Russ, congratulations on your induction into the Near Hall of Fame. It is very gratifying to witness a friend receive this kind of recognition, and I can think of no one more deserving than you for this honor. Over the years, I have come to appreciate all the qualities that make you an extraordinary person, Russ, and the acclaim that you receive now demonstrates that others also recognize you as a leader amongst your peers. I am so very proud of what you have achieved, but most importantly, I am proud to be counted among those fortunate enough to call you friend. Continued success and good health to you, and here's hoping that you enjoy a wonderful day on this very special occasion. Your friend, Bobby Orr. And so now I would like to ask Ken Smith and Russ Conway, my friends, even though they gave me too many unwarranted black flags over the years, up here for their permanent induction into the New England Hall of Fame.
All right. I'll be brief. I have to be, because Russ is next. Thank you, Lou. Wow. That introduction was real nice, even though you did stretch the truth quite a bit. And it made Russ and I look like a couple of angels from the old Nesmer gang. Angels, maybe Charlie Elliott and I might qualify someday as an angel, but Russ, no way, not ever. I don't think so. Seriously, let me say today is a very special day for both Russ and I. We both feel honored and very privileged to be included among all the many great individuals, many of which we looked up to as our heroes, that are already in the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. Before I go too far, we both want to offer our sincere congratulations to today's worthy inductees and to all the NERA folks who made today one of the very best days of our lives. Please accept our sincere thanks for all you do for our wonderful sport. It is very much appreciated. One more important thank you goes to the third member of our Nesmer management team. I'm speaking about the Hall of Fame member from the class of 2000, Charlie Elliott. Charlie, we wouldn't be here today without your guidance and your assistance along the way. You were always there for us, as well as always there for Nesmer. For that, we thank you. Thank you very much, Charles. Now, last year I stood before this group and told you how very special and how strong the bond was that our racing family has shared over all these years. We really didn't know how special it was at the time we were active. But believe me, it was very special. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here today. Back then, we were busy having fun, working long hours, getting very little sleep, receiving very little financial reward, and making those difficult sacrifices just to be at the track. However, how exciting and enjoyable, especially when you did well. Well, today, because of this, I have many stories and warm racing memories, and I'm sure you do too, and you've been telling them most of this afternoon. So I encourage you all to spread the word about this event. Never, never give up your interest as well as your support for the vintage clubs like NERA, and attend their events during the season. You are the reason that this is special, and don't forget it. Two quick examples of what I've been talking about. For the last 3 years, Russ and I have helped to promote and organize a race's annual reunion on the grounds of the Old Pine Speedway in Groveland, Mass. Close your eyes with me for a moment. Flashback. It's a warm Thursday evening in summer of 1948. That's 58 years ago. Can you see him? Yes, it's Wild Bill Randall. Out in front, wheeling the famous 21 McLeod Offie to another feature win at the Tiny Pines Oval. Just nosing out his teammate, Johnny Thompson, driving the number 20 McLeod Offie. While Johnny Kay, Red Cummings, Joe Sestilio, and Oscar Rillen crossed the finish line in a blanket, rounded out the top 6. Wow, what a finish, bellows the track announcer Ken Ash, who was also broadcasting the feature event over radio station WHAV in Haverhill. Back then, we were on the radio. Can't do that today. Okay, wake up, open your eyes. I know those were the golden days of auto racing, but back to this reunion at the Pines, which was big, very big. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the grounds and the huge tent were nearly filled with race cars, vendors, concession, and of course people. And it stayed that way until the sun went down. The magic spirit and the passion for old-time auto racing was in the air all day. More than 3,000 people showed up to relive those memories of a grand old racetrack that hadn't run a race since 1973. The second example I want to briefly relate. Just a couple of weeks ago, we got together at the urging of Paul and Mary Ann Richardson to honor Racer Russ, my partner over here, for his 1,000 nights of promoting and running NESMA races. Well, that day was another one that I won't ever forget. More than 300 of our old NESMA racing family showed up on a Sunday afternoon in a snowstorm to share the magic spirit and racing passion that filled the room well into the evening hours. On display outside of the restaurant that day, collecting snowflakes, was Lee Allen's sleek Twister cut-down from the 60s, and one of Ollie Silver's famous super modifieds. Ollie's car had not raced in 28 years, yet 15 interested racing folks recently contributed $1,500 each and purchased the car so that we and many others could relive our fond memories and keep the spirit of the Big O alive. Yes, the spirit of racing is still very much alive, and only a large racing family like all of us here today can experience that feeling after all these years. Thanks again for making today a highlight for me. And Russ, you only have a couple of minutes to say, wait a minute, there's even more, and be sure and tell your friends. Thank you.
Good job. I want to thank the selection committee and congratulate all the inductees as well. I want to thank all of you people here today, all of the drivers, car owners, crews, officials, media, and especially the fans who supported all kinds of our NESMA events. I want to thank the people from Lebec Rouge that are here today at Hampton Beach, because that's NESMA headquarters south, if you ever want a good bar. Anyway, in 1999, I went into the Hockey Hall of Fame with Wayne Gretzky. And today, it's better than the Blues Brothers, I get to go in with Ken Smith. I'd like to know, why is it Wayne Gretzky has a full head of hair and is the president coach of his club, the Phoenix Coyotes, and Ken Smith has a full head of hair and is the president and CEO of his bank, and I have virtually no hair and I have no job and I'm almost bankrupt?
That's the truth.
Thank you, Ken, Charlie, for allowing me to be a part of the team for 25 seasons. You guys have really been a lot of fun, and you helped out a young kid get older and grow up.
then that's it for the end of being serious. Like Bentley Warren said when he heard about this, it's about time you guys got indicted. It's lucky over the years we didn't get grabbed. You know, Charlie Elliott, with Charlie, we came up with one of our sayings a while back. Anything can happen, and it usually does. For example, we used to have a spectator race at the end of our nights, both at Star and at Hudson, and one night we got about 20 cars out, and fans would sign a release, get a helmet, drive what you want. Last car comes out, it's a beautiful brand new Pinto. And the flagman calls me on the headset, Ed Boyer, I think it was, and he says, you know, that's a girl in that car? I said, really? We tell the announcer, you know the policy at Hudson Speedway, ladies before gentlemen, and we put her right on the pole. She never made it to the second turn. Pinball, I mean, she looked like a top going around, hit all four corners. So we're doing the payoff. We're at the payoff window. All of a sudden, this girl comes up on the side, and she says to me, is there anybody around here with a wrecker? And I said, a wrecker? Yeah, I was in that. I don't know if you saw that last race, but I was in that, and I need somebody to tow me home. I said, where do you live? Derry, New Hampshire. I said, I think we can arrange that. Yeah, my father and mother are gonna kill me. And I said, what do you mean? They gave me that car for a graduation present Friday night. Of course, you know, you had to have everybody on the same page. And we were on the same page most of the time. Dick Batchelor told this story the other day. You know, something happened at the track, and he got nowhere with me, he got nowhere with the flagman, he got nowhere with Ken. So he goes to look up Charlie, try to plead his case, and Charlie had a dog named Chubby. He was a hound dog, and Batch is standing there, and he puts his helmet down, brand new Bell helmet, and he's telling Charlie, geez, these guys screwed me, blah, blah, blah. Chubby the dog looks at Batch, and all of a sudden he lifts his leg and pisses right in the helmet. Of course, Charlie, what people didn't know, Charlie had another pet for 1 year. He lived in the Everglades in the middle of the winter, and he came back one year with an alligator. And this is a true story. The alligator was a little alligator. It was only about that big. Of course, by September, the alligator was 3.5, 4 feet long. He kept it in a pen out back by the trailer at the Speedway. So we had Chubby the dog and Choppers the alligator. Well, one night, his son comes up. I'm up in the judge's tower up at the top. We got the Star Classic, the Nesmer Classic going on that night, and my God, he's looking at me frantic. He says, Russ, Russ, Russ. I said, what is the matter? He's in a panic. He said, the alligator, yeah? It escaped. I said, here we are in Epping, New Hampshire on a September night. How do you explain to 3,500, 4,000 people there's an alligator on the loose? We paid good money over the years. That was a tradition. And when we were going to pay our millionth dollar in prize money, which was about 1971, we wanted to make a big deal out of it. So finally, we decide to have a party, which is nothing new for Nesmer. And I said, let's have a cake. And Johnny Busick, the great Bruins Hall of Fame hockey player, was a good friend of mine. He knew this baker just off of Route 1 near Boston. And I says, I want to get a cake made. Yeah, well, go see Godfrey. I go and see him, and I said, geez, we'd like a cake. Well, how big is the cake? I make anniversary cakes, birthday cakes, wedding cakes. I said, nah, we want this cake. It's for about 3,500, 4,000 people. A cake? You know how many eggs that's going to take? I said, yeah, we want a cake. Well, we'll see what we can do. It'd be a great gimmick. So anyways, I get the Boston Globe to take a picture of the cake. We get the cake made, put it on a bunch of plats. Charlie shows up with a flatbed truck, trailer, put it on the trailer. He's going up 95. Can you picture this? Here's this cake, 6.5 feet tall, as wide as this stage. He's going 15 miles an hour up the slow lane with a cake. So we get it to Star. We're going to have this big cake. It's all in the papers, the pictures in the paper. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, Charlie wakes up in the trailer. And he says, what the hell is going on out there? It was like Alfred Hitchcock and the birds. Every crow, every sparrow in a 10-mile radius showed up in the barn. And here's Charlie running out there, honking the horn on the truck. Get the hell out of there, blah, blah, blah. The baker had given us this big, big pot, this barrel almost, full of frosting. Just like you'd have a carpenter would have plaster on the side of a wall. Charlie spent the next 4.5 hours going over the cake, going over the whole thing. What people didn't know that night, here we are living in this day and age about bacteria and everything. Here we are, these birds that got at this cake, not only did they peck away at the cake, they pooped all over it. You know, it was fun having different drivers over the years. I mean, and I love their names. You know, how many people can you go and tell one of your friends, one of your employees, his name is Bugs? I mean, really, Bugs. We had Bugs, we had Swifty, we had Punky, we had Fats, Johnny Tripp. I always wanted to know, where the hell is Johnny Tripp going? And then we had Dynamite, Ollie Silver, and Big Daddy Don McLaren, and the Golden Bear, Eddie West, he's over there. Ricochet Richardson. What driver in his right name would want to be named Ricochet? We had Bud Shenley, Jim Beam, and Jack Daniels. We had, these guys came out of the mountains, and they really did. We had, we had Buck Moses, Chug-a-Lug Moses, and Royal Moses. And Chug-a-Lug didn't get nicknamed because he drank a lot. He was always in the friggin' way. We told him to go back to the mountain. We promoted cars and stars and fights and feuds, and if there wasn't a fight and a feud, we made one up. We had a match race once between Ollie Silver and Don McLaren. Got them out on the track, all ready to go. They're side by side, and it was the last race of the night, and guess what? Mysteriously, the lights went out. Boy, we got to hype that one for another week. We went out and promoted it. They crashed and banged, and sparks flying and everything, and it was a hell of a race. And somehow, we kept on going. We ran all sorts of divisions with our Nesmer events, all sorts of drivers. We brought Richard Petty to New England. Dale Earnhardt won 10 out of 12. Buddy Baker, Cale Yarborough. Anybody at Stafford would remember Tim Richmond winning in a modified. We had all sorts of drivers. We even had rats. Rat Lane, Barn Rat Devaney, Wally Pankrats. And I always got to figuring out, how the hell did they land at Star Speedway? Well, did you ever spell star backwards? But I will end with one classic story. One big one. Charlie Elliott decides to run a fair when we're running the World Series. He brings a guy in by the name of Joe Gerlach. Joe Gerlach, he jumps out of a balloon into a sponge. Now, I mean into a sponge. And so he gives you one free jump. And so I go to Manchester, New Hampshire, asking for the tallest building in town. They say the state building is 19 stories. I said, no, that's too high. You got another one? Amoskeag National Bank, it's 7 stories. This is perfect. Why? Well, I got this guy who wants to jump out of a window into a sponge. It's dollar days, and every Wednesday they close the street. Big main street in Manchester, New Hampshire, Elm Street. Well, sure enough, we set this thing up. Don Anderson, he was at the Union later, set it up with the president of the bank. I'm at Thompson putting out flyers, go flying up Route 93. Londonderry, New Hampshire, I get nailed in the speed trap. Cop pulls me over. He says, you know, the old story, you go into a fire, look, I got this promotion going on in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Going to be a lot of people there. I was kind of in a rush. What kind of promotion? Well, this guy's jumping out of the 7th floor window of the Amherst National Bank into a sponge. The cop looks at me and he says, don't go anywhere. About 5 minutes later, the other cop pulls up right in front of me, cuts me off. He's in the front, the other cop's in the back. They're both talking. He comes over to me and he looks at me and he says, tell this guy what you just told me. I said, wow, this guy's jumping out of into a sponge. Somehow I don't think this is going to happen. I said, why don't you guys come? You'll see. Yeah, okay, we'll follow you. So here I am, 2 New Hampshire State Police cruisers follow me. The place is packed downtown. Get there, there's 2,000-3,000 people in the street. The sponge is in the middle of the street. You walk in, here's Joe Gerlach in his white jumpsuit. The president gets cold feet. He says, wonder if he misses the sponge. What are the legal ramifications? Now we got no place to jump. Find a building up the street. Sure enough, around the corner they go. They drag the sponge up. 2,000 people following them. Carlton Fisk, the former Red Sox catcher, he shows up. What's going on? Guy's jumping out of out of the building into a sponge. Really? I got to see this. Goes up. They're on the corner. They're announcing in a phone booth. And Joe Gerlach's getting up on the top of the building. He's going to jump into a sponge. And just like you'd see, sure enough, he jumps into the sponge. Boom. The cops, I see the 2 state cops, and they say, you know, that was pretty good. He ended up at Foxborough Stadium jumping for Billy Sullivan. But we promoted one race once that nobody knew what they were going to see. It was the last hurrah. This is certainly the last hurrah for us for today. Thank you very much, and this is a real big thrill. Thank you for it.
You know, one good thing about being into the Hall of Fame, you're in it for life. They never can take it away from you. But after hearing what Russ did, I'm not so sure about that anymore. You know, you guys actually had a school bus demolition race with topless dancers. How I wish Speed Channel was invented in those days. They would have had 4 M's: money, muscle, mouth, and must-see auto racing. Our next presenter is an accountant, and it's a good thing he's good with numbers because he needed to be good to figure out all the championships that our next inductee had won. We welcome Glenn Wright.
Thanks, Matt. Boy, it's always tough to follow promoters. The only thing I can say, Russ, is I did go to college in Boston. I was a big Bruins fan, and Johnny Busick lived next door to me for a season, so that was a hell of a Boston Bruin club. It is my distinct honor to participate in the induction of what I think is the greatest short track driver in the Northeast to the near Hall of Fame. I have owned Robbie's team for most of his racing career in the Northeast. There are many wonderful stories to tell over the course of 15 years of racing, which time does not allow me to share with you. However, I will share one story which I think is very fitting in how I was selected to induct Robbie into the Hall of Fame. And it fits in very nicely with the show that we just saw dealing with promoters. I got this call from Tom Curley, who many of you know, in December, saying Robbie was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he said they're looking for someone to induct him, and they asked me. And he said, I told them that you should be the person to induct Robbie for 2 reasons. First, you clearly know him the best. You probably worked with him as closely over his career as anybody else. He said, secondly, and I have to divert a minute. When Robbie stopped racing for me and went to NASCAR North, I observed him over 15 years and said, driving a race car is really the easiest part of this whole team sport. So I just jumped right into the driver's seat. And I raced late models for a while, and at most of Curly's tracks. So Curly said to me, you know, you meathead drivers are all alike. He said, you always think you're better than you really are. And he said, you know, I'm sure way down deep, you have aspirations of someday being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And he said, if you do have those aspirations, I suggest highly that you induct Robbie Crouch into the Hall of Fame, because that's the closest you're ever going to get. Robbie's racing accomplishments are clearly too numerous to mention. I will give you some highlights of a career unmatched by anyone in the Northeast. His career started in Tampa, Florida, racing for his legendary father, Clarence A. Crouch, better known to all of us as CA. Robbie and CA came to Vermont in '79 in order to compete in a weekly 5-race circuit made up of Thunder Road, Airborne, Catamount Stadium, Devil's Bowl, and Senair. Robbie won his first race in the Northeast at Catamount Stadium on July 7th, 1979. This win started Robbie on an unprecedented career over the next 15 years. Allow me to mention only the highlights of some of his accomplishments. He won the NASCAR North ACT Championship 6 times, 1983, 84, 86, 87, 88, and 1990. His cumulative driver performance from 1979 to 1994, based upon money won, he's first in money won of $978,000, and he raced in 337 races. He's first for the best finish. He won 77 of those races. Now, as an accountant, I figured this out with my calculator, that every time Robbie took the racetrack, he won 1 out of 4 races that he stepped onto the racetrack. He had an average finish of 7.3. He finished, he's first in the number of top 5 finishes, 206, second in the number of top 10 finishes, 243. He's first in career points earned, over 24,000. He's first in career laps led, 6,500, and he's the first in most races led, 119. At Thunder Road, the site of excitement, some of Robbie's accomplishments are as follows. He is the only 4-time winner of the Milk Bowl, having won it in 1983, 86, 88, and 1990. He is one of just 3 drivers to win all 3 Milk Bowl segments, and he did that in 1986. He has won the Milk Bowl without winning a segment, talk about a stroker, and he has won the track championship multiple times. Robbie's accomplishments are unheralded, but never could have been obtained without a properly prepared car at each event. Robbie was very fortunate to have outstanding crews over his 15-year career. Many of those crew members are here today, and I would like to take a moment to recognize them. When I mention your name, if you'd stand, I'd appreciate that. Longtime crew chief for Robbie, Dick Lyons from New Hampshire. Dick. Longtime crew chief from Fairfax, Vermont, Brian Latouche. For those of you that thought that Brian didn't stand up, he really did. It's an inside joke. Longtime crew member Carl Osha. Another member of Robbie's team for many years, Gary Graves. Gary? sign of a great champion is not only what he does on the racetrack, but what he does off the racetrack. Robbie Crouch took stock car racing to a new height as a spokesman for the sport and his representation of the tour as its champion. Robbie's charisma and his ability to speak publicly brought increased professionalism to stock car racing in the Northeast. He always made sure to treat the fans as number one, always taking time for them and letting them know how important they were to the success of the sport. His positive representation of the sport caused sponsors to seek him out, which added financial support to the operation, which obviously contributed to his success. I am proud to have been a part of Robbie's career and accomplishments. On a personal note, Robbie is my dear friend and business partner. Our relationship is very special and what life is all about. Robbie, my friend, you are one of the greatest racers in modern history and one of the nicest people placed on this earth. It is now my distinct privilege and honor to induct you into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame.
Well, nobody can live up to that. The greatest racer ever to, well, whatever. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn, did you wear your glasses?
I do.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone involved, especially Glenn. That was very nice. A lot to live up to. But I'd like to thank everyone involved in the New England Antique Racers for your long hours and hard work preserving the history of racing in New England with the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame and honoring me with this great award. Some of the people that are responsible for my success are here today, and some of them aren't. I would like to thank them all, especially the ones that made it here today to share this moment. This award is equally shared with all of those that helped me to reach this point. I would like to take a little time to honor my father tonight, C.A. For those of you that don't know him, he was truly unique. I would compare him with someone people in this area may be more familiar with, Lenny Bowler. My father would milk the last ounce of life out of a racing part. His joy came from doing things differently. He would spend hours designing, and even days, designing and building a suspension that would defy logic and make it work. And we would argue for hours on every side of an issue, as if some truth would eventually be revealed if you argued long enough. There are a couple of images of my father that will always be with me. A beer, cigarette, and drive with your knee. Truly a danger. And the second thing is a cutting torch, which was his favorite tool. Congratulations to all the inductees, past, present, and future. Some I have known, and some I'm just thrilled to learn about today. You have added to this rich history, and you should be proud. Thank you for this award. It will be cherished. Thank you.
Now to make the presentation, a man who has been with us on 4 prior near Hall of Fame dinners, a man who best known for his work at the Beach Ridge Speedway in Maine, where he still does some announcing. Let's meet Bruce Elder.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here for what many of us believe is probably one of racing's most important endeavors. Well, realizing that most of you probably did not see the Libby brothers race, I thought it might be helpful to make some comparisons. First, Bob Libby, with a very smooth, patient, and calculating style, would remind one of a Terry Labonte on the national scene, or perhaps a Jerry Marquis in this region. While Phil, on the other hand, had a more aggressive, always after it style, like a Dale Earnhardt, or probably a Teddy Christopher. Well, regardless of the difference in styles, the results were similar: great success. Starting in the late 40s and early 50s, the Libby brothers soon became dominant wherever they raced. First, Phil in a 37 Ford, a former sheriff's car, in which he was flipped in the first turn of his first lap of competition. Now, some might have taken that as kind of a bad omen, but Phil, with his never-give-up attitude, wasn't deterred. Bob, on the other hand, won his first time out behind the wheel from the pole, but then wasn't able to win a second feature for about 6 months. Again, not at all deterred, perseverance was always a key trait of the Libby brothers. Well, by the mid-50s, the Libbys were so dominant at Oxford Plains, winning 21 of 23 features in one stretch, that on one occasion the promoter paid them first-place money to simply leave their cars loaded. Throughout the 50s, both raced and won at Beech Ridge, Oxford, Lewiston, Unity, basically wherever there was a track they could get to. Well, perhaps the most pivotal event in Phil's career happened at the end of the 58 season, when for the first time he climbed behind the wheel of Charlie Thurston's number 99 and won the feature. Phil said it was the first time he ever got hell for winning. It seemed that Charlie had been saving the car for a non-winners race at the end of the season for a bigger payoff. Well, that began an incredible 3-year domination. The success of the number 99, which came to be owned by Ray Snell and Galen Wilson, is well documented. In 1960, Phil won 21 of 27 features at Beech Ridge and a championship at Oxford Plains. Came back the next year and won the title at Beech Ridge in '61. Now, meanwhile, during these years, Bob probably took more second-place finishes than any other driver, perhaps with the exception of Ralph Cusack. The Libby brothers could also be found at special events all the way from Canada to southern New England. It was also during this period that Bob became heavily involved in the state's primary racing organization, the Maine State Stock Car Racing Association. While serving as its president, he was at one stretch requested to serve simultaneously as president of the Pine Tree Racing Association at Oxford Plains. By the way, Bob even borrowed the Beech Ridge blueprints and helped with a redesign of Oxford Plains from its original half-mile to the present third-mile oval. During this time, Bob continued to drive the A-Class modified number 39, which was one of the dominant cars of the decade. Etched in the memories of many northern New England and Canadian race fans are visions of fierce A-Class battles that took place on the unique clay of Beech Ridge among Bob Libby, Phil Libby, Ralph Cusack, Homer Drew, Dick Wolstenholme, among others. Well, by the early 70s, the high-powered super modifieds entered the Beech Ridge lineup, and with this came some tough competitors from around New England, such as Wally Prescott, Jerry Dolliver, Dick Berggren, Dave Snap, and Howie Brown. Still, Bob and Phil Libby continued to be among the best in the division. During this time, Phil could also be found in a B-Class modified. In fact, he won the championship in the Pure Hell Camaro in 1973. Also during this time, Phil could be found at open events from Oxford Plains down to Thompson and Martinsville in a NASCAR coupe. As some of you may remember, by 1977, Bob and Phil garnered some national exposure by being featured on the cover of Stock Car Racing magazine. The article by Dick Berggren highlighted their then highly successful 28 years atop Maine motorsports. Now, in addition to their on-track success, both brothers have served in pivotal positions in Maine racing. Bob is a 13-time president of the Maine State Stock Car Racing Association and is the Beech Ridge Motor Speedway race director since 1990, thus spanning 6 decades, making him the longest-serving race official in Maine history. Phil was elected president of the MSSCRA 6 times and even pioneered an international exchange program which enables some top Maine racers to compete in Coventry, England. Phil made 2 such trips himself. I believe that there have been no greater ambassadors for our sport of auto racing in northern New England than the Libby brothers. Both Phil and Bob have already been inducted into the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame, and now it is my great pleasure and honor to invite Bob and Phil's daughter Gail to come forward to accept the induction of the Libby brothers into the New England Motorsports Hall of Fame.
Well, it's a little intimidating to follow the voice of Beech Ridge Speedway, and my Uncle Bob, who's the hometown selectman and speaks in front of hundreds of people. And now that I know my dad is watching on the video, that's he'll be glad to know that I did practice more after yesterday leaving the hospital. He made me stand in front of him and take his speech and read it with the same inflection that he would use. So here it goes. Thank you, Bruce. You know, Bruce isn't just the voice at Beech Ridge. He also won the track championship in 1979. I would like to thank Near Hall of Fame for the recognition of Bob and I today. In the early 50s and 60s, we had several out-of-state drivers and owners who had come to check out the dirt tracks at Beech Ridge and Oxford Plains. Guys like Red Cummings, Leo Clary, Armand Hawley, Bud Crotty, Jerry Wheeler, Don McLaren, Bentley Warren, Longley, Andy Cody, Nash Cucci, and Skip Matzachek. I kind of thought these sounded a little like mob members, but he assured me they were very vital in his career. When I asked him what cars they drove, were they supermodel, what kind of cars, he said, all styles, better known as hot cars. He writes, every once in a while, Ed Bowley would bring his car and driver. Ernie Gahan ran several years at Beech Ridge. Smokey Bodwell, yes, Smokey. We all ate his smoke once in a while. So he wanted to make sure that he remembered many of you owners and drivers who are here today. He also wanted you to know that there are really 3 Libby brothers honored here today. His brother George helped many years building the cars and the engines. And Andy Cody, who built great Ford flathead engines. Clyde Booth, a great consultant. And J.B. McConnell, the builder of Beech Ridge Speedway in 1949. The Cusack family, not just super competitors, but great friends. And Goodwin Hannaford, Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame inductee of this year, was a great engine and car builder and an excellent consultant. And Brother Bob picks his brain often to this day. Dick Bergeron has been a great friend to Bob and I. He gave us more than our share of publicity over the years. And I remember guys like Lou Boyd, Bruce Cohen, and Dick Bergeron coming up to Beech Ridge with the number 181. Dick got to be a regular, especially when we ran sprints. He brought along a guy who always wore shorts, and his name was Doug Gore. To see Dick in that sprint car number 80 going over 100 miles an hour on a foggy night under the lights with the vapor trail off the wing was one of the greatest sights ever to see. He says, I would like to thank my family, Gail, Dale, Stacy, Stephen, and Scott, and all my friends that are here today. My brother Bob, a great driver, an interesting guy, very professional and generous. He writes, he and I have been extra special to each other over the years. He is my best friend as well as my brother. He has two great sons, Jim and John, and a beautiful daughter, Diana. Now he would like the whole group of Maine to stand up with their wives and girlfriends or someone else's wife to be recognized. And he wanted me to make sure I paused here to give them a chance to stand up. So everyone from Maine. He just wanted everyone to know what maniacs really look like. He thanks for listening to his memories. He took a little spin off the fourth turn right now. He has the best pit crew in the business. He always races to win, and he will be strong and actively involved in this organization for a long time. Thank you.
Bill always did beat me with everything we did, so I guess my niece has also. I just want to thank you all so much. It's tough, but I want to thank the selection committee for choosing my brother and I just have to thank him for most of our career. He was the guy that pushed all the time and made us work hard and keep the cars going. And so it was a great brother. As it was, speaking of the Speedway, originally we put together a 1940 Ford Coupe in a friend's barn. I happened to be able to weld and he could fabricate, and we bought a flathead Ford from Sears and Roebuck for $110. I remember that, and it was a decent car. We continued along with that. The association, as it happened at our Speedway, split the gate with the promoter. So as we got into it, we realized that the more people you could draw into the grandstands, the happier that all the people were that raced there. The payoff was better. So as you get involved in that, and the owner, Jim McConnell, used to let us put on special events and try to do better for the racers and the racetrack, and we split the gate. And it turned out to work very well. We had that association, I believe, lasted about 40 years, and it was a great thing to have done. As it is now, I have to say, with Ralph Cusack got the track, did a great job with it, spruced it up, made it look so good, and obviously since then his son Andy has done the same with it. It's a great racetrack, and I know a lot of you have been there. I couldn't help but think Robbie Crouch coming up here is probably one of the smoothest drivers I've ever seen. And I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. But I do have to tell you one little story about Dick Berger. Dick Berger used to race with us, and he used to fly, as Gail told you. With Doug Gore, and probably the best sprinter ever at Beech Ridge, he would really go. So we were having a good race, and we had a good evening, and things are going well for us as far as racing, finishing up in there. So on the way home one Saturday night, my wife turned to me and said, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I had rather watch Dick Bergen go out and practice than I would the rest of the complete race meet. And that destroys your ego, I'll tell you. So anyway, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I would like to Thank my wife Nancy, my daughter Diana, my son John, and his best friend. Thank you again.
Now, they say our next presenter has a collection of more than 50,000 pictures, and today this is the day where the pictures come to life and the memories come alive, and this man has been keeping memories alive for years. The historian of New England auto racing, R.A. Sylvia.
It's once again an honor to be up here and an honor to be included with this fine group of inductees and presenters. And it's my pleasure to induct a gentleman that came out of the era that Jim McGee alluded to, when they had bombers, six-cylinder cars, the cut-downs were strong, they had the full coupes, and this gentleman was from my particular area where I lived, Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. And he was a tremendous competitor, a master of the short tracks, both Norwood and Seekonk, and he had great success at the other tracks in the area. He started out at Norwood, and in the year of 1954, it had been written, I was a little too young to remember, but that year they raced 4 different classes at Norwood, and Joe Rosenfield was the champion in 3 of those 4 classes. And in the other class, the modifieds, which were cut down, so he came in 7th or 8th. So it wasn't too shabby a year for Joe. He was actually born in Rhode Island and moved to Bridgewater, Mass. At an early age. And he was apparently quite the young man around town, as I've been told. He had one of the first cars, and of course he was the hit with all his friends because he would chauffeur them around everywhere. And he also been known to take a horse for a ride from Bridgewater to Brockton, which was about 15 miles. Why? I haven't been able to find out, but he did. But he lost a little favor with his friends one night. They were roller skating at Square Acres in Bridgewater. And Joe was, much like myself, a little portly. And he was ended up at the end of a whip. And everybody thought it would be kind of funny to send Joe for a ride. So off they did, and Joe went over the rail, landed on his skates, and said, "The hell with these people." He went out the door and left them all to fend for themselves to get home. So that might have been the start of his competitive nature. But after he mastered Norwood pretty well, he ran Lonsdale. He won a feature in Lonsdale in the bomber cars. And then he moved to Seekonk in the later 50s. He mastered that place pretty good because he ended up being track champion there in 1960, 1961, 1962, and 1964. And that was the heyday of the flathead full coupes at Seekonk, and weekly they had upwards of 40 machines, and just making the feature was quite an accomplishment. And Big Joe, as he was known, took the measure of all of them those 4 years, driving mostly for Arthur Smith's number 44s, and then in the last year of his championships, he drove for Dick Willis's, the Jelly Bean Special at number 47. I remember Willis's car because he was one of the 3 or 4 guys at Seekonk that took great pride in concocting their own special racing fuel. I remember I got stuck in the tunnel there one August night when the cars were waiting to go on the track. And if you had the worst sinus condition ever, standing next to that car for about 10 seconds would have cleared everything. Your ears, your eyes, your throat, nose, you could breathe great again. It was great. It made your eyes water, but it was great. After the flatheads kind of went away, he ran the late models for quite a few years, did a little traveling around. He ran for Leo Matty and Mr. Robinson that owns Riverside Park. Not Riverside Park, sorry folks, I'm in the neighborhood. Riverside Speedway, Groveton, New Hampshire. He also ran a late model for Pepsi Jim Rogers, which was on the Seekonk and Westboro circuit, and that was Joe's last feature win, was in Jim's Pepsi Chevy 2 at Westboro in 1968. But Joe soldiered on for quite a few more years in C.J. Robinson's cars, and ran the Seekonk, Thompson on occasion, and was a frequent visitor at Oxford Plains, Maine, where he's still remembered today and well respected. And of course, as most of our instances, you get involved in racing and it passes on to your family. And Joe's son, Joe Jr., had quite a good driving career himself, and also a successful career as a car owner in Maine for many years. His other son, Jimmy, still runs at Seekonk. Got himself a feature recently. Made his mom feel good because she sits right near where I sit. I always watch her agonizing over the boys. And David has been known to take a few laps, brother David, in all kinds of cars, midgets, SKs, and everything. And it was a pleasure to have watched Joe race over these years and to see his family carry on in his legacy. And it is my honor to officially have inducted into the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame, Joe Rosenfield Sr.
Well, the story with the horse, he had a theory that he'd always have more money in his pocket if he invited the girls to the movies and met them inside. He did play whip on the skating ring, and when they whipped him out to the railing around the outside, he went through the railing, not over, and he was asked not to come back because he was too rough. He raced a lot of tracks with a lot of people. In my mind and my whole family's mind, he was a great hero. He had a lot of heroes himself. He loved Bugsy Stevens. He loved racing with Bugsy. Leo Cleary, George Summers, Ron Bouchard. His greatest hero of all, we went to Stafford every Friday night because he never saw a man drive a race car like Billy Wimple. He was the master on dirt. My father went to the races many, many nights because he wanted to study the drivers. Everybody that ran up front had something to learn. He wanted to learn more from the many drivers that he competed with. I stood in the tunnel many times with him where Bob was talking about, and he'd go out in one warm-up and he'd come in and the car was good. He was very content. He'd stand there in that tunnel at Seekonk and he'd watch these guys go out and practice and practice and practice. And he'd walk back to their car and he'd tell them, boy, you're going tonight. You're hooked up. Tonight's your win. Well, that put the end to them guys going back out for warm-ups. He outsmarted them just by talking to them. He was very, very smooth, very consistent. You could set a clock by him. He loved racing with people. He loved joking and playing games with people. He beat a lot of them playing games with them. He loved his family, and he loved automobile racing. If he was alive today, he'd want to still be racing. It was the greatest thing that he ever did. And I know that he'd be very, very proud to accept this. I wish he was here so he could. To me, this is the greatest honor that he could ever get. Thank you very much.
Now, here's a remarkable writer because he's been involved in the business for more than 30 years, and he's probably one of the most prolific writers, as his stories about drivers appear in programs, newspapers, a lot of publications in the area. We're happy to have him involved with today's program, Pete Vanderveer.
Wow, let's see, 5 down, 5 to go, and it's 3:40. I promise I will be brief. As brief as I can possibly be, because I'm a huge fan of Desperate Housewives, and I know if this keeps going, I won't make it home to see that start of that show. But before I start, I would like to recognize, with a sense of sadness, the passing of Gene O'Donnell. Gene was a fellow writer. He worked in Springfield for many years. He covered hockey, baseball, and he loved the Boston Bruins. He died on January 1st. He was only 59. And I can tell you, as a member of the fraternity, I'm going to miss him very much. What's in a name? Think about it. Then again, think about that wonderful era in which our next recipient, Fred Sharkey Gaudiosi, recited it. Stock car racing in New England in the 1950s, 60s, and into the early 70s was raw. In its infancy, car owners like Gaudiosi, who grew up and spent his entire life in Waterbury, Connecticut, had to be rugged individuals. Just about every part on their race cars, from the wheels up, was built by them. There were certainly few chassis builders back then, and only a few people who put together motors for a living. You learned your craft as you went along. If you caught on to something, it stayed within the confines of your garage. But let's go back to the name Sharky. I thought about it. Where did it come from? Was it a tag name that Gaudiosi picked up because he had a biting personality? Did it come along because perhaps his car designing abilities were ahead of their time, which they definitely were? To get an answer, I called Sharky's son Skeeter, who's here today to be a part of this celebration. I was informed that the elder Gaudiosi was a boxer in his prime, that being the late 1920s and 30s. Growing up in and around the Great Depression wasn't easy, as we're all aware of. People put food on the table any way they could. Obviously, Sharky's talents at boxing were soon put aside once he visited Avon's Cherry Park in 1947. He may have had his first encounter at a midget race, but he fell in love with stock cars. From his garage on East Aurora Avenue in Waterbury's West End, Sharky Gaudiosi began a career in racing that lasted up into the 1970s. The list of drivers who drove those famous number 44 coupes, always painted pink, white, and black, ranged from Rico Montesi, Sharky's first driver who tested his talents at Bridgeport's Candlelight Stadium, all the way up through and including Tommy Branch, Billy Greco, Bill Slater, Ron Narducci, Rini Charland, Gene Bergen, Harold Montaigne, Mo Guernsey, Ted Stack, and Ed Flemke Sr. Billy Greco emerged as an upcoming star in 1953, winning a seat in one of Sharky's earlier cars over another soon-to-become well-known driver, Tony Mordino. Between them, Greco and Gaudiosi won championships at West Haven in 1953, 1954, and 1956, and picked up 3 championships also at Riverside Park. They constantly traveled to faraway places like the Pine Bowl in Snyder's Corners, New York, and to the Empire State Speedway a little farther up the road in Menands, New York, between Albany and Troy. Greco will tell you that Sharky was a quiet person who kept to himself at the track. They spent countless hours together, and Billy even rented an apartment in Waterbury during the winter of '52 and '53 so that he could get close enough to watch those early cars being built. Sharky's versatility was evident. He made a smooth transition from asphalt to dirt in the 1960s with drivers like Bergen, Narducci, Charland, and Montaigne, who won a track championship at the Lebanon Valley Speedway. The wins mounted up. They came at West Haven, Waterford, Plainville, Pine Bowl, Menands, Lebanon Valley, Fonda, Orange County, Riverside Park, and I'm sure countless other facilities that were cleared from the racing landscape years ago. Sharky Gaudiosi died in 1976 at the all-too-young age of 63. His wife Evelyn, a constant companion, passed away in 2001. So many memories were left behind. It would be interesting, though, to see what a car owner like Gaudiosi would have thought about the New England racing scene today, where chassis and engine builders abound, where money flows into the sport like we all are living on Wall Street, and where the sport, sadly, has become way too homogenized. Unfortunately, we'll never know. But the legacy that Sharky created lives on today. His grandson, Chad, won the 2005 Thompson Modified Championship and obviously has a great career ahead of him. It is with pride and honor that I induct posthumously into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame the late Fred Sharky Gaudiosi, and if Skeeter would come up, his son, to receive the induction.
I just want to say thank you for coming, and everybody involved in this. And I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. And Sharky, go racing. Thank you.
So now we're going to bring back our Vice President, Bruce Cohen, who will make the next presentation, and we hope he's not packing anything today except a few good one-liners. Bruce Cohen.
Thank you, Matt. It's a great pleasure for me. The two gentlemen I am about to induct is a story of accomplishment and friendship. Vic Bombacci and Bob Vitari, part of the V8 racing team, along with Wild Bill Slater. Bob and Vic grew up near each other in Essex, Connecticut. Both of their dads were farmers. They came from humble backgrounds. In their youth, they decided to go racing. They built a car, had a few drivers, with some success, but not that much success. In 1958, they put Bill Slater in the car for a few races. In 1959, Bill had the ride full-time at New London Waterford Speedwell. The car at the end of the year had all kinds of feature win stickers attached to it. They won the track championship. In the winter of 1959, they asked Bill, look, Bill, we're building another car. You can have a choice of cars. You can either go to Waterford or we're going to go up to Norwood, which had just gone NASCAR. Bill chose the Norwood Arena venue, and the rest is history. In that year of 1960, Don Collins ran one of the cars at Waterford. Bill ran the other modified at Norwood. Two racetracks, 100 miles apart, two different venues, two drivers, two cars. Bill and Bob would swap, one would swap venues. One would go to Waterford, the other would go to Norwood, and then they'd switch. Well, consider this. Both cars won track championships. That is an accomplishment. Also in 1960, a little before the Eastern Bandits, that Denny Zimmerman and Rini Charlander here, along with Ernie Gahan, modified race at the Trenton, New Jersey mile track. This was the first time that a New England modified car won a major event. It was a harbinger of things to come. The V8 racing team started to make their mark. In the 60s, they won 5 track championships at Norwood, 1 at Thompson. They were one of the cars to beat. The Trenton race is very significant. They also won extra distance races at Malta, Utica Rome, and Oxford Plains. They also competed in the Permatex race down at Daytona and gave an excellent accounting of themselves. The highlight of their racing had to come in 1965, in what is considered by many, including yours truly, as the holy grail of automobile racing, the Langhorne Classic. This was the best of the best. If you thought you were good, you went to Langhorne. And if you qualified for the Classic, that made a year. There were many top drivers from all over the East Coast who would show up and never had a prayer of making the race. Well, in 1965, Bill Slater, along with Vic and Bob, scored that win. It was a major milestone. It was even covered in the Boston area newspapers, which hardly covered any automobile racing at the time. It proved that they had arrived and they were that good. Bob Vitari and Vic Bombacci were owners who got their hands dirty. They designed and built the cars in small garages alongside their home. Bill, after he finished work at Pratt & Whitney, would chase parts. Basically, Bob did the chassis and Vic did the motors. And it is with great pleasure, but before I ask them to come up, I have to tell a personal story. I started getting involved in racing about, 1960, 61. Started hanging out with all those guys up in Gasoline Alley in Needham, Greggy Mills, Jack Malone, Bobby Melnick, Pete Hamilton, Donnie McTavish. And one night in 1964, the V8, those guys came to win. They never thrashed the car at the track. They came prepared. Well, one June night, Bill Slater starts 16th. Hop Harrington's in the field, Leo Clary, a whole bunch of inductees in our near Hall of Fame. Bill starts 16th. By the 10th lap, he's long gone. I mean, he blew by Flemke and Leo and Hop. It was like, see you later. Well, some of the boys in Gasoline Alley were a little upset. So they figured, we're going to protest this guy. Earl Wild, one of their crewmen, came over to me and said, Bruce, this is the smallest motor in the joint. I think we were allowed in the sportsman division at the time about 358 cubic inches. Earl said, it's about a 305, 306. I said, look, Earl, don't kid me. I've been around this thing 4 years. There's no way that's that small. Well, to make a long story short, Greggy Mills and the Needham boys protested the car. They tore it down, and sure enough, it was a 305. What they didn't know was that Greg Mills in the Jack Malone driven 79, which finished second, had a stroker of about 380 inches under the hood, which was a lesson to me that everything is not as it seems. But I would like to call up Bill Slater too, along with Vic and Bob, the V8 racing team. They set the bar. They were the first ones to wear uniforms, the mandatory black pressed pants, white shirt, white shoes, and black shoes and black pants. They looked sharp. Even their race truck was always looked like it spit shined. These guys in the so-called glory era of model racing, they set the bar, they set the pace, and even though I think they're still mad at me for helping to protest them, it is with great honor and reverence and respect that I call up Vic Bombacci and Bobby Vitari. Gentlemen.
First of all, I'd like to thank Bruce for the fine introduction and presenting our accomplishments of our history. Got to kind of wait a minute, I'll get my composure together here. At this time, I'd like to recognize the fellow that took us from Waterford Speedbowl north to the Oxford Plains, Maine, and as far south as Daytona International Speedway. There's many tracks along the way, and received this award in recognition of our contribution as a team to the sport we all enjoy. That fellow and that person who made the V8 rock and roll, Bill Slater. That day that we hired Billy Slater was the day that we went as a team to be successful for 9 years together. And that's a record we are real proud of, Bill. Got to make sure I'm on the right subject here. From Billy, from Vic and I, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for a relationship we will always remember. Now I have another driver that I have to recognize that drove for us for 1 year at Waterford when we decided to go NASCAR at Norwood. And like Bruce announced, it was Don Collins. And Don, we want to thank you very much for your contribution to our sport and to us as a team, and winning a championship for us in 1960. Now, on behalf of Vic and myself, we want to thank the Executive Board of NEAR and the people that voted for us to receive this award in recognition of our team's achievements. Thank you all very much.
Now, our next presenter knows what the Hall of Fame is all about because he was instrumental in getting the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame started. And he's also a newspaper columnist, and we're happy to have him with us on today's program, Steve Pellerin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What an honor it is to follow in the shadow of the Connecticut Valley Rocket. I'd like to start by saying, on behalf of the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame, thank you so much for the honor bestowed on 3 of our members today. It's not something we take lightly on this day when we speak about achievement and its impact. Achievement in auto racing, it's so because it comes in the face of such challenge, adversity, and risk, sometimes to the extreme. Impact, as it affects us in the form of good for the sport, giving back to the fans. It brings shape to the color, drama, and memory that we all love about New England's short tracks. These traits, they draw us all together at this time of year to remember and honor the greatest of New England's auto racing fraternity. But I'm sure Dick Walsnium wasn't thinking about this, as he and his brother John spent many an afternoon in a nearby field chasing one another around in old jalopies and trying to tip each other over or spin each other out. Dick's dad, a former motorcycle racer, took the pair to nearby J.B. McConnell's New Beechridge Speedway, where he thought it'd be a bit safer. After some practice runs, Dick ended up in the seat and finished the race somewhere in the back that day. But more importantly, the spark was lit, and Dick returned there to run again. But following a rollover and a subsequent broken leg, he was out of racing for a short time. It was 1950, and the jalopy racing in New England was exploding. At tracks all over the place, they were drawing huge crowds, and the jalopies became sleeker, faster, as they headed for the era of the cut-downs and the modifieds. Lou Boyd about how many of these tracks brought out the emergence of a bomber class called B-class cars. And at Beechridge, the same thing happened. The group organized as a class of pre- and post-war six-cylinder coupes. Dick Walsnium took an immediate liking to that class, and his talent behind the wheel blossomed. He soon became a threat to win every week. The wins began to come in droves, and wife Phyllis was put in charge of the trophy room. No small task. Dick also began to look at other places where he might run, whereas he could manage. He ran at Sanford, Maine, Dover, New Hampshire with Charlie Elliott, at Arundel, Maine, on the half-mile dirt at Oxford, and at Unity. He took his first bomber championship in 1960, backed it up by 61, 62, and 63. He also stepped into the seat of Dick McGarry's potent black and white 38 Chevy Class A modified, and made his presence known, taking many Class A wins throughout the region. In 1966, Dick rewrote Maine's auto racing history, taking both the A-class and B-class titles at Beech Ridge. In the 17 years the Bombers ran at Beech Ridge Speedway, Dick won 7 championships in that division, far more than any other driver. He took his last Bomber title in 1971 behind the wheel of a beautiful 37 Ford two-door sedan, blue with checkered flags on either side of the numbers. Dick's cars from that time frame, they always had striking lettering jobs, courtesy of his wife Phyllis. Those trademark checkered flags on either side, they were so easy to spot for a youngster like myself on the fence cheering on his favorite driver. In 1974, changes were afoot at Beech Ridge, with the A-class becoming super modifieds, the Bombers fading into history, being replaced by late models. Dick lost no time establishing himself as a man to beat, taking 20 wins that season, 9 of them double headers en route to the super modified and late model sportsman titles, his second dual championship. There's some colorful moments along the way. Dick has been called the Iron Man. In 1967, rain forced the running of season-ending doubleheaders for both the A-class and B-class, with 75 lappers for the A's and 50 laps for the B's. Dick won his heats. The races got over late that day, but when they were done, Dick Walsnium had won them all. Announcer Don Kent gave him the name Iron Man, and it's stuck ever since. In October of '69, Dick hauled up to Oxford Plains for their season-ending championship, billed as a 100-lapper for their late model cars. Bear if he could run. No was Bear's answer. But Dick persisted, and soon Bear relented with the rules that he start last on each restart and remove his slicks in favor of street tires. He started last in the event, moved up to third place by halfway. When he pitted for fuel, took to the tail once more. He moved up to third place again, where he spun out on lap 71, took to the rear once more. By lap 96, he was in 5th place, took second on lap 98, overhauled the leader, on the next to last lap to win the event this October afternoon and the $1,000 prize. In May of 1970, a group of British sailors from the sub Artemis were guests at Beach Ridge and asked to present a trophy to a driver that impressed them the most, and Dick got the trophy that day. The program editor, Bob Tatro, later wrote, "I didn't realize the significance of this at the time, but my darkroom is a great place to think, and I couldn't help but marvel that of all the cars that these strangers saw that day, they picked Dick Wallstream and his Zero. I don't think anyone connected with Beach Ridge could pay a higher compliment than this. Congratulations to Dick." The Artemis, by the way, sank on the with all hands in sight of the English coast. The crew was rescued with a diving bell. Pete mentioned about a little bit of color in the sport, and I've got one more, and Lou, you'll like this one. In June 1970, the Bombers were awaiting a restart, sitting on turn 4. The class had 32 runners that night, and 20 of those cars were capable of winning on any given night. Dick was having a tough time with the current B champ, whom he felt been chopping him just a bit too much in the turns. Dick pulled in behind his up-front rival and proceeded to slam into him. The surprise recipient responded with a wave. The crowd on hand that night, more than 5,000, caught it too. Making sure he got his point across, Dick backed up and banged into him again, and the stands went absolutely wild, with thousands cheering in agreement. The 10-time track champion is also the winner of more than a half a dozen 100-lap events at Beach Ridge. He is a member of the Beach Ridge Speedway Hall of Fame and was in the inaugural class of the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame 2004. So it does me great pleasure for all those cheering fans to please ask Dick Wallstream to step up here.
I want to thank Mia, Hall of Fame, for having me here. I am so happy and thrilled to be here. And for Steve. And I want to thank my wife, my daughter, my granddaughter. And I am so happy to be here with the Libby boys getting elected the same time I am. Thank you very much.
Now, I always knew our next presenter was a giant in the publishing industry with Dick Berggren, Speedway Illustrated. And I always knew he was a great TV commentator. You see him on Fox Network. You see him as a guest on shows like Wind Tunnel. And I knew he was a member of the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. But one thing I didn't know until today, that he was the most exciting practice driver in the history of Maine motorsports. Dick Berggren.
Just a quick story about that. When I raced sprint cars at Beach Ridge, I thought the best way to figure out how fast the car would go was in warm-ups, and I just get down the backstretch faster and faster and faster until finally I couldn't make the third turn. When I got to that point, I knew damn well that was it, and I'd go off and race okay for the rest of the night, usually. Boston Louis Seymour was one of New England's most colorful, energetic, and successful car owners. During the years when my career as a journalist was beginning, I was there with Boston at places like Reading, Syracuse, IRP, Phoenix, and the mile in Indianapolis, the mile dirt. And I saw at that time firsthand the enormous respect that he had earned among the drivers, the crewmen, and most importantly, the other car owners in the United States Auto Club. When Boston was a kid, he went to big league races with his father. It was a time when somebody who loved automobile racing could go sit in the stands and watch midgets 7 nights a week, and of course you could go on Sunday afternoon and see them at that time as well. There were big car races, and young Louis Seymour saw a lot of that racing from seats in grandstands in those days. And it was from those seats that Boston's affection for top classes was born. He was quoted in a 1982 story in Open Wheel magazine saying, "Once I saw A.J. Foyt backing her in at Williams Grove in the high bank battles of Winchester, there was nothing else I wanted to do." And so for his entire career as a car owner, Boston Louis fielded fast, sophisticated, open-wheel cars for the best and most sought-after drivers of the day. He began as a car owner in the late 1950s at age 31, quarter midgets for his 2 boys. Then in 1965, he formed a partnership with Bill Deacon, with the objective of going off with some real race cars, and they started out with a Champ dirt car. The following year, they bought a sprint car. But Boston's real partners were the people who were fascinated with his style, his limitless energy, and the adventure of racing all over America out of a little backyard garage in the East Coast. The core team was family. Wife Ellie was there every race. Sons Mike and Bobby were in the pits twirling wrenches and rubbing elbows with people like A.J. Foyt and the other stars of the Indy 500. 3 daughters, Mary Lou the oldest, Lois middle, and Celeste the youngest. At least one of the 3 of them could be found in the grandstands with Mom at most races, and frankly, sometimes you could go in the middle of nowhere and there was Boston with his 2 boys, his 3 daughters, and his bride all at his side. Others like Eddie Longname, whose real last name was Havajimian, were key to the team. So is Diesel, who's here tonight. His real name is Dominic Inferrara. Longname built the engines by hand in a tiny shop just beside Route 128. Those engines were the match and often tied best built by the finest shops that had unlimited budgets. Longname never charged Boston for his labor. He just liked being part of that team. He liked going to the races, being part of Boston's extended family. Diesel, of course, yeah, he drove the truck. Then there was Dirty Dave Ciancio. He was a big help. And the guy who would drink beer as he lettered the car, O.J. Dragway McKinney. All these people were drawn by Louis Seymour's magnetic personality and the great racing adventure that he was experiencing. 30 years ago, in 1976, Boston won the USAC Silver Crown Championship with Billy Casella as his driver. The season had come down to the very last race of the year. At Syracuse, tension was high that day. Score 1 for the little guy, Boston Louis, because all the top teams were there and more than a few had a shot at that title. But Boston's sprint cars, those were really his trademark. Black with a gold number 29 on the tail tank. They were driven by Ziggy Snyder, Greg Weld, Scratch Daniels, Bruce Walkup, Johnny Parsons Jr., Eddie Levitt, Sheldon Kinzer, Roger Rager, but especially Billy Casella, with whom Boston enjoyed enormous success and developed a wonderful friendship. Boston Louis' trips to America's heartland and even California for active competition in USAC's Thunder and Lightning series of sprint car racing meant long tows, tows that went deep into the night and then the next day into the daylight. And he did that more than 10 years, towing 100,000 miles and more a year. Do the math. 10 years, 100,000 miles a year, that guy towed sprint cars 1,000,000 miles during a decade. He was fortunate to have had a new car dealership as a sponsorship because every year the truck was gone come September or October when the season finished. And there was the time when young Mike, at age 16, just gotten his license, driving the truck, tire blew, everything went upside down. Boston Louis pinned inside in the back of the truck, tools, toolboxes, all sorts of things. Fortunately, he escaped with only minor burns. It was a wonderful and a colorful time in sprint car racing. It was a time of the incredible Larry and Gary show with Larry Dixon and Gary Bettenhausen, each trying to outbrave the other. And the courageous ones, like Lee Kunzman, who came back to race again after horrible injuries. Many were they who made the trip to the hospital instead of victory lane during this era of abnormally brave drivers and extraordinarily dedicated car owners. Many were those whose lives ended in the wreckage of a twisted sprint car. Ironically, Boston Louis was better known out of town than he was here in New England. And during those days of drama, danger, and million-mile tows, our family man from Marlborough, Mass. Did what nobody else from our part of the world had done before nor since. Through his own hard work, with the help of friends and family, He gave his all in order to successfully compete against the best of the day wherever they may have been. In 1981, he and Roger Rager made a run at the Indianapolis 500 with an old car and a small block Chevy engine bolted together by who else? Eddie Longname, and they almost made the race. But it's the variety of events in which Boston Louie earned the first place trophy that's so impressive. He and his crew won in USAC midget competition on pavement. He won on the flat dirt track at Terre Haute in a sprint car, with Ken Schrader driving 3 times in the Copper Classic at Phoenix in a Silver Crown car. Flat asphalt tracks, Toledo and Sandusky, Ohio, in sprint cars. High bank asphalt tracks, the terrorizing joints at Winchester and Salem in sprint cars. The bank dirt track at Eldora. And even indoors, where in December of 1985, Ken Schrader wheeled a midget prepared by Boston Louie to the checkered flag. But he won the biggest of all at the time, the Hullman Classic, 3 times. In its day, the Hullman was the #1 sprint car event of the year. It was so big, the race was broadcast live on ABC Wild World of Sports. In 1971, Boston won the first ever Hullman with Ziggy Snyder at the wheel. The following year, he won it again, this time with Bruce Walkup as his driver. And the final year the event was on television was 1980, and Eddie Levitt won, driving for Boston Louie. And this, for many years, the opening of Wide World of Sports included footage of a black sprint car tumbling end over end the length of Terre Haute's backstretch. The driver, Billy Casella, the guy who owned the car, Boston Louie Seymour. Well, Casella had been auditioning for a ride and had turned some laps for Boston that day and had done pretty well, passed a lot of cars, but he was just absolutely bound and determined he was going to go as fast as that car could possibly go, and he went a little faster than that. Middle of the week, Casella called thinking that his ride surely was over since he had demolished the car and wanted to know how things were going and who was going to drive it that weekend. And Boston Louie said, "Why, bring your helmet, you're driving it," because I never saw anybody pass that many cars before he crashed. And they were together ever since. They trusted each other, Casella and Boston, so much so that Boston would stand in the turn at the entry to the turn and be a personal marker of where he wanted Casella to lift, and not any sooner. Casella was either incredibly brave or something was missing somewhere, because he would wait until he got right to Boston Louie before cracking the throttle. They had an incredible partnership that lasted so very long. The sprint car racing in their era was a dangerous business. And at Winchester, the partnership ended. Casella and Dana Carter got into it at about 130 miles an hour, and the 2 sprint cars crashed down the straightaway in a crash that all but destroyed Casella's arm. They had been leading USAC sprint car points going into that event. But that was the end. Casella was out for good. Not Boston. He never quit racing. He was at IRP for a race in 1996, literally weeks before he died at the all-too-young age of 69. He was inducted into the Sprint Car Hall of Fame in Iowa in 2004. Boston Louie Seymour's accomplishments and his character surely make him worthy of entry into this Hall of Fame as well. His family is here to receive the honor.
This is just fantastic to be here. 2 years ago, we went out to Knoxville to the Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and it was just a wonderful feeling to know that all those miles that he traveled and we traveled along with him, it's really unbelievable that all these people saw that. And the one thing I'd like to say, though, all the miles that he traveled and the races that he won, I told Dick Bergen this before, not many people really knew him until Dick Berggren, who had known him for a long time, started writing about him. And like Jimmy McGee was saying, you know, this part of the country isn't as well known as Indiana or California or whatever for racing, but we had it in our back pocket. We had Dick Berggren, the writer of Open Wheel magazine, and when he wrote about Boston, that's what made it all possible for Boston to be Boston Louie. So Dick, thank you very much for what you did for him, and I just thank everybody here today for honoring him and the selection committee. There's just so many drivers out there that made him what he was. You know, Dick talked about a lot of them, but I'd also like to say that here today, there's two of them that I saw, and two of them that a lot of people may not know drove for Boston. And one of them over here is Danny Zimmerman, and he drove for him in 1967, I think it was, a couple times, and did a great job for him. And I know he would appreciate Danny being here. And also a guy that I really liked, Nicky Fenoro, drove for him and won a race up at Star Speedway. And Nicky did a great job that night. And he told me last night, I know he went to bed about 4 this morning after the NEMA party, but to have him here today, that's really special, even though he's only got one arm there. But thanks, Nick, for coming. Thank you all for staying this long, and we really appreciate what you've done for us here today. Thank you.
Keep the Connecticut thing going. We got a lot of guys as far as the 60s.